Hello my friends, Taki here, and welcome back to another alternate history Hearts of Iron 4 video. I have to say this before we begin, thank you for all those who gave their input on the previous video that we had done on what if France went fascist. The sheer amount of suggestions that you all gave in the comment section was overwhelming. And I really do appreciate each and every comment, even some of the weird ones. But either way, last time I asked you to go ahead and give your questions on the next what-if scenario that we would be addressing, and the most liked one that went up on the community poll ended up being what if Germany had continued to try diplomacy. This actually wasn't too far ahead of Switzerland, so that's probably something that I'm going to end up trying here next as well, since that was also well voted upon. But it does bring up an interesting question. What if Germany had continued to try diplomacy instead of actually waging war in Europe? There are many different cases where we talk about history where it seems to be set in stone, but war is not necessarily one of those, at least immediately. Now don't get me wrong, war was always on the table for Germany. That was always the end goal. That's always what it wanted. But initially, the goal that Germany had, or rather that Mr. Mustache Man here had, was that he wanted to get an alliance in like the early 1930s with the UK. He wanted to be able to build an international coalition in order to specifically be able to take out the Soviet Union and move east. So how can we build the scenario in which Germany actually tries to be diplomatic? Well, let's dive into this. In the year 1936, Germany is already on its way to become an industrialized power. Really at this time, not much else that we're going to be doing from the beginning is going to be all that different. But instead of focusing all of our resources into military armament, there will be aspects of trying to focus specifically on building up our spy network, as well as our industry and diplomatic relations. Really, until around 1938, things are going to look relatively stable and the same, with the Rhineland incident still occurring in 1936. Military setup from the beginning is basically going to be the same, not really much else that we're going to be doing different there, and as I said, it's going to follow a similar route of a standard Germany game, except, well, we're going to be a little nicer, I suppose. So there's that to consider. With that, my friends, let's go ahead and begin. With the completion of Rhineland and the remilitarization of it, we can now move on, and this is an interesting point that we're going to have to bring up in 1936 as to where our first divergence is going to actually take place in history, though it's not going to be really represented in the game. One of the things that happened in terms of foreign affairs is that in 1936, Ribbentrop, who you may remember from the whole, let's pull it up in here. There it is, the Ribbentrop Pact. So the Ribbentrop Pact was, as many people are aware in history, the thing in which Germany made a treaty with the USSR in order to be able to further invade other territories. The division of Poland, all these other things, that was determined in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Ribbentrop ended up achieving power to be able to be the foreign minister of Germany, specifically after his actions in like 1936, in which he negotiated a naval treaty with the United Kingdom, or was it 1935? Anyway, he did this in the mid-1930s, and that impressed Mr. Mustache Man so much that he was made the foreign minister. The problem is that this guy, although he could build up good relations with states like the Soviet Union, when it come down to the big moment here with whether or not Poland would refuse or allow them to get Danzig, he was very arrogant towards the Polish. And this in turn is something that greatly pissed them off. The other guy they had at the time, Göring, he was actually way more liked and respected in Poland. So there is a possibility that the Polish would have worked with Germany if he had not been replaced. So I suppose that's what we're going to do. We're never actually going to go down the path of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. We will never form a treaty with the USSR. We will never do any of these things that historically was kind of this mixed relation that Germany had with the Soviet Union, even after continuously putting out propaganda and everything against them. So with the Rhineland, that means the 4-year plan is now to be done. Germany had a plan to rapidly boost itself economically during this time, and it's actually interesting that we have the 4-year plan because initially the idea under, who is it, Himmler Schlacht, I believe was his name? Yeah, Himmler Schlacht, that guy. So initially the plan that he had was to kind of bind everyone in Central Europe in a kind of German-dominated customs union, so to speak, right? And initially it was supposed to take like 4 to 6 years or something small like that, but then as they were rolling out this plan and gradually trying to integrate the states around them with this, Germany was told in like, or Mustache Man was told back in like 1936 or 7, something around that time here, Mustache Man was told that it was going to take significantly longer than what had been anticipated, so they started a pace of rapid industrialization and preparations for war that was supposed to take 4 years. So it's actually kind of weird that he's represented in here for being the 4-year plan when that wasn't his initial thing. Of course, we're still going to need to build up a large military. That is absolutely crucial for our developments. By early 1950s, after appointing Goebbels in charge here and getting our propaganda going, Germany is able to activate its war economy, really kicking things into gear at a pace that Europe is simply not prepared for. With the completion of the 4-year plan, Germany starts down a path of rapid industrialization and preparation. Autarky is next, because for Germany to truly be great, it must be self-sufficient, it must make better use of its resources, and become more efficient in its construction. Everything needs to be rapidly done here to boost up industry in preparation. At the same time that we are working on building up our economy, it's important that we try to dominate the Netherlands economically here. The more that we're going to be able to boost our relations with them, the better that it is for us. Oh, and of course, I forgot that Spanish Civil War broke out. Yep, that is still a thing that no matter what happens in the scenario, Germany is still going to be trying to affect it. Absolutely. Forces are still going to be sent, and from this, Germany is going to gain valuable experience while simultaneously making the world a little bit more cautious as to what they plan. German mind is pretty obvious when it comes to things over here in Spain. That is simply something that is going to happen. However, the focus that Germany is going to have on this time is building up a very strong economy. It's going to focus on rapid industrialization and building, and specifically trying to build relations with its neighbors around them. To that end, understanding what is to come, this is where Germany is going to heavily focus into its spy network, specifically trying to get relations, dirt, and everything that it can possibly find on everyone around them. Very strong emphasis in this case is going to be specifically put on diplomacy, trying to pressure the states around them as much as possible. To that end, though we can't necessarily represent this in terms of foreign affairs, and considering we're going down the historical path, there's a decent chance that Poland may refuse things, what we're going to do is just try to build an intel network in and see if we can influence Poland. Now, by the beginning of 1937, we can go ahead and do the Anschluss, but here's the problem. If we're actually going to be running a historical game, so to speak, the Anschluss didn't actually happen until going into, say, like 1938, right? That's when that occurred. So if we're really running with an alternate history scenario, we can't actually do this yet. At least not for the first half of the year. I'd say that past a certain point, with enough focus, perhaps focus on specifically trade and also with trying to influence the state of Austria as much as possible, Anschluss could have potentially happened earlier, so there's that. And so I guess to represent the new diplomatic focus that Germany is going to take, they're going to move to try and align Romania and Hungary as quickly as possible. Denmark offers a trade proposal. Hey, okay, so if in this scenario, right, that Germany is focusing on a more diplomatic effort, then that means that yes, even if it's actually not very beneficial with the whole, 10% consumer goods, we would still take this specifically to just help with things with Denmark. The question is, would Germany actually want to apply diplomatic pressure, or they want to actually try to stage a coup in Poland? I don't think that would quite happen. Instead of the coup, we are going to just continue to try to boost diplomatic pressure, see if that ever does anything. All right, by mid-1937, Germany has been working for a couple years on trying to build up its economy. It has built up its military by quite a decent amount, but the Anschluss has not happened yet. What is going to happen is that it is this point that they're going to strongly focus on building an anti-Comintern pact. This is where diplomacy becomes key. Are things going to be affected here by this? I don't necessarily know, because we still have historical AI on, so there's some things that we may have to forcibly change around. But we will still go with the anti-Comintern pact, and we will start to build relations with the Eastern European states. With the anti-Comintern pact, the immediate step after that is that we could wage war with the USSR, but let's see, we need at least 850,000 manpower and divisions in the field for this. And we are working our way towards that, though. We are definitely doing that. It's this point that I think that it is early enough that we could go ahead and launch Anschluss, even if it is still like 3-4 months early. Yugoslavia requests sale of airplanes. Well, honestly, if Germany is going down a more diplomatic path, even though we could just not give them anything, it makes sense to be able to sell them some stuff, just in order to try and boost further relations. With Anschluss having taken place, that means that we should be able to unite, and Austria becomes a German state in what was essentially a coup. It definitely was a coup, but slightly early, this should be fine. In what was a massive boost to Germany's economy, the next step after this is where the real question happens. In this alternative history scenario, Germany by this point started putting pressure on every single state around them in order to be able to get its claims, demanding the Sudetenland, etc., etc. And I think before we do any of these things, we will actually launch an anti-Soviet pact. The only way that anyone in here will be called into war is specifically if the Comintern goes and attacks them. So, if historically, after Germany had taken over Austria, what one could do before trying to go on a warpath in order to take everything else over is that they could have gone down and pushed more of their anti-Soviet propaganda. They could have tried to unite the Eastern sphere specifically behind them. And if these states are going to accept, this is theoretically what could be done. Of course, not everyone is going to accept that. Yugoslavia is not happy. Denmark is canceling their trade agreement. Yes, that is going to happen. They're not pleased about this, but it doesn't really matter because at this point, Germany is extremely powerful. And more important than any of that, they are simultaneously going to be able to start preparing their master economic plan. With this, the German Reich would formalize the anti-Soviet pact. The German Reich has long condemned communism in all forms and has made diplomatic motions to demand other nations oppose it as well. Now the German Reich has offered states under immediate threat from communism a chance to form a pact against the Soviet Union. Any country in the pact will be committed to fighting a war against the Soviet Union, and should there come a time when a member is attacked, yes. This would be the point for Germany that would effectively serve as a kind of diplomatic coup. It is here that they would want to try and push their demands while simultaneously trying to ward off the greater powers around the world. Befriending Czechoslovakia at this point really isn't something that is more likely going to happen. The reason being is that Mr. Mustache Man really wanted to have Bohemia. Therefore, historically, we are still going to go down the Sudetenland path and carve up Czechoslovakia. It's past that point that things are going to change. Meanwhile, with the spies representing Hermann Göring having continuously been working here in Poland, it is very possible that Poland eventually would come to see the light and their own dictatorship would align themselves with the fascists. With this, Germany will become controller of the Sudetenland. Talks have been held in Munich between the leaders of Germany, Britain, France, and Italy to discuss the future of Czechoslovakia. Both the British and the French have accepted our claims to the Sudetenland as legitimate, and their previous offers of support for the Czechs have been rescinded. Recognizing the hopelessness of the situation, the Czechs have surrendered the Sudeten territories to us, and the oppressed German inhabitants will long last be brought into the Vaterland. Immediately after that, it is time for the First Vienna Award. The Hungarians were one of the people that suffered worst after the Great War. In the slaughter of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, many Hungarians were stranded on foreign soil, though their ancestors had lived there for ages. We could improve our situation with Hungary by awarding them some territories from Czechoslovakia. Yes. With nationalist forces victorious down in Spain, we've earned ourselves a healthy amount of experience, and simultaneously, this means that we're going to be set for future events. Through continuous diplomatic action, such as donating fighters to Bulgaria, we will eventually be able to achieve greater relations with them and bring them into the diplomatic fold. Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria are all not aligned, but that eventually will change. And with that, my friends, we have the fate of Czechoslovakia. The time has come to divide them up, and, well, not much they can really do about it. Now we can invite Hungary. Yes, welcome into the fold, Hungary. Thank you so much for joining us. With the fate of Czechoslovakia, it's an important question. Partition Czechoslovakia with Hungary, all of Czechoslovakia belongs to the Reich, or set up Slovakia as a puppet state. Well, this is what we're going to end up doing. We're going to set up Slovakia as a simple puppet state, just as historically would have happened, but after this is where the real pressure begins. World tension by this point is decently high, and we've generated quite a lot of it, so it's going to bring up an important question of what would happen if, say, Germany actually went down the diplomatic route and did Danzig for Slovakia. The Poles stand in the way of our plans for Lebensraum. Still, it is not too late to alter our long-term priorities and seek their friendship instead. The only possible way this would come through is through a traitor territory, Danzig for Slovakia. Poland has already shown some interest in the region by occupying Zaolzie. In this alternative history scenario that we have built, this is where Ribbentrop is not in power. This is where he is not the foreign minister. So that means that Germany has actually had Göring in charge, who in turn has been building relations with the Poles the entire time. Theoretically, this is something that should work. The question is, do the Poles accept this in the historical game? Probably not, because they're going to be hardline to resist anything that Germany does. But even until right before war broke out, we're talking last-minute overtures in the previous months before war, Poland was actually remarkably friendly towards Germany at this time. So, by all means, they should accept, and we may have to force that to actually happen. Bulgaria seeks Balkan claims warranted. Well, yes, they are going to recognize, they are going to want to boost further relations with Bulgaria and other states because they're going to try to diplomatically surround everything in Europe. We've applied a significant amount of diplomatic pressure upon Poland. The question is now, do they actually accept? Danzig's for Slovakia is done, and the Poles... they did it! Poland has agreed to the exchange wherein Danzig will be ceded to the German Reich, while Slovakia will now be under Polish control. Through this agreement, we have claimed Danzig while maintaining cordial, or at least not openly hostile, relations with our eastern neighbors. This is fantastic! Germany is won again. In doing this, that is amazing. The United Kingdom and France both lose their war support. In doing this, in a massive political coup, this would show that Germany was not just trying to take over the world, though they actually were, of course. They really did want to do this. But specifically in building building international relations and applying as much pressure, if Mustache Man had been significantly more patient, then things would not have actually turned into outright war. It's amazing. It means the policies of Neville Chamberlain would have actually been seen as successful. Appeasement would have been seen as a good thing. Thus it is then that Germany will go and befriend Poland. They'll make friends with them. The real question is though, what comes after this? In the action of befriending Poland, we're going to actually boost our relations with them, which is excellent. That is what we want to do. And we can now invite Romania into the faction as well, so we will do that. With Romania joining the faction, this means that Germany can now apply enough diplomatic pressure onto them, which is going to allow them to integrate their economies with us. The nations in our sphere of influence have grown to have extreme economic dependencies upon us. We could use this power to increase control over their economies and influence on their foreign policies. With this, we'll be able to effectively take them over, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The next step in securing power and influence, making sure that the Balkans are actually protected, because in the event that a powder keg blows up here, we don't want it to turn into a world war again now, don't we? Kingdom of Romania accepts economic integration, and so does Hungary, meaning they have become satellite states of the German Empire, no longer bound to their own kind of political ideology. Italy is now welcome to join into the faction, which is excellent. Welcome to the fold. By June of 1939, the writing is effectively on the walls for Europe. Germany has almost doubled in size. Hungary, Romania are now both puppets of it, and simultaneously Italy has joined in their faction. Almost all of Central Europe is bound within the German sphere. The question is, can continuous diplomatic pressure work on the Balkans? The Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye saw many historic Austrian territories passed out to successor states. With Austria once again united with the German nation, it is time to end these injustices. The historic provinces of Carniola and Strio, which are known as Slovenia, must be brought home. The question is, will Yugoslavia accept? Historically, what would have happened in this scenario, or I guess considering our alternate history scenario, is that it is proven through the actions with Poland that the policy of appeasement actually does work. Therefore, we're going to have to switch on over here to the UK real quick. And at the London conference, what would end up happening is that more than likely England would give Yugoslavia to Germany in order to secure peace and make sure that things finally stopped. I switch back over here onto Germany again, and for whatever why are you suddenly war planning on Poland, Germany? That was fixed! You can take the Danzig out of Poland, but you can't take the Poland out of Mustache Man's mind. Yet it doesn't matter. The London surrender, in yet another triumph for daring and action in Slovenia, soon to be renamed Carniola, has returned to its rightful home in the German Reich. Yes. The immediate aftermath of that would be the First Ljubljana Award. The hypocritical Western powers preached national self-determination while handing over many minorities to be ruled by the Serbs. We are in a position to right that historic wrong and make friends at the same time. For those who wish to side with us in the European order, we can be very generous. Indeed. The end of the League of Nations. My friends, in 1939, regardless of the actions of the Germans, the Soviets are still more than likely going to stage an incident with Finland. The problem with doing so is that in staging this fight with Finland, this means that Finland was a signatory of the alliance. Meaning every single state, if this had actually played out in this alternate history scenario, would have now been at war with the Soviet Union. Finland calls pact members to war, which means that we are going to be joining them in a war against the Soviet Union. How many other entities are also going to join? Estonia will join the Axis. Latvia will join the Axis. This right here, my friends, would be the diplomatic coup. Germany had been trying to build an anti-Soviet alliance for years, but the United Kingdom and France were not willing to play ball with them, so to speak. This action, though, would be the thing that would actually cement the German legacy as not just an entity that was trying to take over Europe, but a peacemaker, a protector of Central Europe, ignoring all the other domestic things that they would have been doing at the time. Formalize the alliance. Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and Afghanistan gets the event the anti-Soviet pact. Wait, did Poland not join in? Poland did not join in on the alliance. Well, that is an interesting thing. Well, I have to say that is actually pretty... Historically, that wouldn't have happened. I can't just go in and change that because world tension, for whatever reason, is not high enough yet, but we'll have to get that fixed later. But the result of it should still be relatively similar. The Soviet Union, thinking that it would have to be able to expand into Finland, would find that, unfortunately, the Finns were going to be significantly stronger than they had wished, and on top of that, now the Germans would be moving forward into the east with their allies. Meanwhile, through Balkan pressure, Yugoslavia would end up being divided into very different spheres of influence, with puppet states being set up here in order to be able to call even more forces into the fray. Of course, a coup is likely to still occur in Yugoslavia itself that remains, with this putting Peter II in charge. After a little bit of console finagling, this finally actually brought Poland into the fray, which is a good thing because they needed to join in the conflict and should have from the way that that diplomatic situation worked in the first place. With the joining of Poland into the fray, this just means that the Soviet Union is now surrounded from multiple sides. Finland is able to hold out relatively well against the Soviets, even with it looks like a bunch of minor naval invasions, which is a bit of a problem. But either way, it should not be able to actually stop them. The Soviet Union, even with its initially larger army, is just not prepared at all. From years of mismanagement, it is already in a bad situation. And when you combine with not only having to deal with the Finns in the north, which historically was something that severely did screw with them, with the added bonuses of having to deal with Germany as well as the entire eastern bloc of Europe, that means that they would be overwhelmed on basically every single side. Moscow falling in the span of merely only about 6 months or so. With the Second Ljubljana War, that's going to mean that Bulgaria gets bound to our side, and the fate of Greece. And just like that, the Soviet Union collapses. The overwhelming majority of the damage was specifically done by us, so it's really not all that difficult to be able to take things. And just like that, the German Reich would take everything. There's a question of what would actually happen in the peace conference, considering this alternate timeline. By 1940-1941, the Soviet Union would effectively collapse, or at least it seems like it would. The question, of course, comes as to what is going to happen during and after. See, the problem with the whole German occupation of Russia is that there was never a plan of trying to unite any of the Slavic peoples against the Soviets. No, initially that was done in the case of Ukraine or other states, but what was quickly found is that the goal of the Germans was not to simply, liberate people. It was to exterminate the Soviet population. It was to create Lebensraum, living room, and actually move in and take over all the territory. Meaning after war is finished, well, there isn't really anything for the Germans to do. Their ultimate goal was to move eastward, and now that they've secured this, they will not have the manpower to actually be able to push forward and attack France, the United Kingdom, or any other territory. Instead, what they would do is consolidate their territory, likely trying to move in and create some puppet governments, but gradually remove the population to be able to replace with their own. Alarmed at this turn of events, allied powers around them would try and unite against the Germans, but not necessarily at this point to declare war. What would have happened is that instead, the Allies would have likely funded resistance movements from varying different democratic rather than communist forces to defend themselves against possible German aggression. Germany, though, at this point, would have its work cut out for it. At this point, Greece would likely go and submit itself to Germany, seeing the way that the winds had turned, and everything else would have to slowly be consolidated. Past that, who can really say what is going to happen? Italy would have joined in on this conflict, trying to get pieces of things here down in Yugoslavia, but that unfortunately has not been represented. More than likely, what I could have done in the scenario is actually give this territory to Italy, which if I had a mod to allow that, I would have done so, but Bulgaria joins the Axis, everyone around joins the Axis, every single entity and state in here, a part of Central and Eastern Europe, is a part of the Axis. At this point, there really is nothing that Europe can do. The world may be waking up, but in 4 or 5 years, who can tell where ambitions may lie? Everyone, this has been Sakui with a alternate history video. This was a rather interesting one because the way that things kind of work in regards to historical AI when you're actually playing as Germany and everyone is reacting to you, unfortunately, it's very difficult to manage all those around you in order to try and build the story of what is supposed to happen. Still, though, I think that it is fascinating, and I believe that we could do a much better job with, say, playing Switzerland in the next round. I appreciate all of you who have joined in. I appreciate all of you who have watched. If you could like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see next. Put your suggestions for alternate history scenarios down in the comment section below, or just what-if scenarios. And with those what-if scenarios, I will take the most liked comments, and I will post them up on my community page in order to determine what type of video we would be making next. My friends, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, guys.